As announced earlier, at 10 a.m. we start with the webinar on EU enlargement 2030, leadership reforms and strategic decision, who, what, and why, organized by the Strategers Institute. And I take the opportunity to welcome the speakers, the panelists of this webinar, and also all attendees that are registered and already part of this webinar today. We have with us Mr. Thomas Hagleitner, Head of Unit on Enlargement Strategy and Coordination, DGNS, from European Commission. We have Melinda Bregu. She is Head of Strategic Board at Europe Plus and former Secretary General of Regional Cooperation Council. Also a former Minister of EU integration in Albania. Then Professor Dr. Gordana Đurović. She is Professor of Faculty of Economics, University of Montenegro, and advisor for EU affairs of the government. Also former Deputy Prime Minister for European Affairs and EU International Cooperation of Montenegro. Then we have Simona Kaczarska. She is Director of European Policy Institute from North Macedonia. Professor Tanja Miščević at the Faculty of Political Science, University of Belgrade, former Minister of European Integration, Serbia. Also, we have with us Alban Hashani. He is Executive Director of Reinvest Institute, Kosovo. Professor Adnan Efendić. He is Professor of Economics at University of Sarajevo, Affiliate Fellow on Perge EI Prague. He's coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have Professor Dr. Habitat Ksenia Smirnova, Vice Rector of the International Cooperation at Taras Shevchenko National University of Kiev. She is also a member of Jean Monnet Center of Excellence in Ukraine. She is coming from Ukraine. And we have from Moldova, Associate Professor Liljana Chimpoies. She is head of the International Business Department, Academy of Economic Studies of Moldova. And myself, as moderator and host of this event, webinar, Fadler Besimi, so from Strategers Institute and also former European Affairs Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance in North Macedonia. I want to welcome once again all the panelists and the attendees, which I see now we are beyond 40 already online. And we'll take this opportunity just to make some notes on the topic that we decided for today. It is EU enlargement is always a relevant and challenging topic. It has been on the essence of European Union itself since its beginning. EU enlargement has been always there. There has been several waves of enlargement since its establishment. We have on 1973, 1981, 86, 95, and then the countries from ex-transition economies or from former socialist countries, the largest wave in 2004, then we have 2007 and 2013. So if we see this range, the last one was Croatia in 2013, and since then there has been no further enlargement. The process of enlargement has been always in the agenda, but with many challenges. And what we want to focus during today's webinar is looking from the perspective, also from the leadership point of view, the decision making, the policy makers, the reform that they have to do, and also the strategic decision. The challenges that are on geopolitical shifts recent years and how the EU enlargement itself has gone through this period and decades, but also what is expected forward. So this is a discussion they would like to have during today's webinar. So I will stop here in terms of the time to make sure that we have the opportunity for all speakers and panelists to share with us the insights about this topic. I just want to welcome, I see now just joined us the webinar, Ms. Mailinda Bregu. As I explained, she is Head of Strategic Board Europe Plus and former Secretary General of Regional Cooperation Council and former Minister of EU integration of Albania. Thank you, Mailinda, for joining us. We're just starting with the webinar. So, dear participants, I take now the opportunity to give the floor to Mr. Thomas Hagleitner, Head of Unit on Enlargement, Strategy and Coordination from DGNS European Commission. So, Mr. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Fatmir. Dear colleagues, very pleased to be here and good to see former colleagues and well-known, how should I say, experts on the EU's enlargement process. Happy to discuss with you where we stand on enlargement, given that many of you have followed this over many years. Now, the Commission has presented this year's enlargement package exactly 3 weeks ago. We've also had, for the first time, upon the initiative of Commissioner Kroes, an enlargement forum last week to discuss enlargement. So let me give a few of the key messages of this year's enlargement package. And I think if I had to summarize in one sentence the message of this year's enlargement package, then I would say the following, and it's this sentence: given the accelerating pace of the process for some candidates, enlargement is a realistic possibility in the coming years. This is what the Commission has said this year. Now, if this is indeed correct, then we need to draw the consequences collectively. Both candidate countries and potential candidates, but as well the European Union. Now, we have seen, coming briefly about the candidate countries, potential candidates, we have seen a very vast spectrum of progress or lack of progress in this year's package. But we've in particular 4 countries that have ambitious targets to close the accession negotiations and have made quite substantial progress over the last year, some of which in very difficult circumstances. We have Montenegro that has the target to close the negotiations in 2026. We have Albania that wants to close negotiations in 2027. And we've also noted the ambitions of Ukraine as well as Moldova to come to the same result, close negotiations in the course of 2028. Now, these are ambitious targets. We've also said it's very clear these are the countries' targets. We've also said that provided the countries continue on this track, these are realistic targets, and the Commission will support them achieving these targets. Now, I'm not going through all of the countries we can do that as part of the discussion, but just as well to highlight when we speak about unprecedented pace. One example would be Albania, where the country has opened all negotiating clusters in the space of 15 months, more or less, which is quite an unprecedented pace. we're also looking at closing further chapters with Montenegro before the end of the year. It just a final word on the enlargement countries. I think we have, obviously there is a geopolitical context, and no doubt this is against this we have to look at enlargement, but we also need to remain clear that enlargement is and has to remain a merit-based process, because there's simply no alternative to it, and that's the way the EU is constructed. It would be neither in the interest of the candidate countries nor the Union to have countries that are not fully prepared. So what I'm trying to say is that we're noting these targets, but of course the pace and reaching this target remains in the hands of the candidate countries. A final word on the European Union. Also, the EU needs to get ready, and we've outlined a certain number of elements in this regard as well. We are preparing so-called pre-accession policy reviews, which will be presented in the near future. We have already made our proposal for pre-accession support to candidate countries under the next multi-annual financial framework and a Global Europe instrument. We will also present a financial package for Montenegro early next year. And we've also started the work on the future accession treaties, and we would hope and expect that the Council sets up a treaty drafting group for that purpose before the end of the year. So this is a little bit the picture of on enlargement, how we see it from the Commission's perspective at this moment in time. And I'll probably stop here and happy to go into further details or countries as part of the discussions. So back.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thomas. I really appreciate these very brief and concise comments. You were just in time within the 5 minutes, so thank you for that. I look forward for other panelists. So, Melinda, now we move from European Commission to also the perspective from the countries from the region, but your background goes more than just Albania. So please, since you have this broad experience on EU enlargement process for the Western Balkans, can you in the next 5 minutes share with us and the audience here your views on these challenges ahead? Okay, thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Fatmir, and good morning to everyone. Some of you I haven't seen in ages, like Thomas, for example, but that's how usually it works when you don't work specifically with the European Commission. They tend to forget you. So that's why, hello, Thomas. I hope all is well in there. Let me just very briefly now say some words. Nothing new. We've been discussing this topic for more than 20 years now. Nothing new from last week, when half of this panel met together in Belgrade, and we discussed and rediscussed again on enlargement. But maybe it's good sometimes to repeat the same messages, especially when it comes to the new, let's say, momentum that some countries in the region are moving to in respect to the enlargement. So the first thing, whenever we tend to speak now on enlargement, looks like a bit odd, although the same calendar rhythm follows, like Thomas mentioned, the progress report, and then the opening or the closing of the chapters, so the clusters, negotiations running especially faster for Albania and Montenegro, and so on. But we all know that the EU is urgently organizing itself, and that means that from defense, cybersecurity to green transition, competitiveness, technological sovereignty, energy autonomy, and more, like basically all of those mentioned in Draghi's report, things are a bit changing. So it's not that discussing enlargement is the same thing or the same mood that you feel around as it was during the last years, because usually when the priorities shift and the trends are different, then as well as the enlargement takes, let's say, a different perspective. We cannot neglect that there is like a new global order moving from US. We have a bit more multipolar structure everywhere in the world with China, India, and EU on the other side. All these regional powers are trying to assert more influence. But as it happens usually, whenever we tend to have a look like in the macrocosmos that is around us, then again in the Balkans we speak more and more about the challenges. We are quite perfect in acknowledging, let's say, the speeches and the quotes from every single leader worldwide. But our ambitions and eloquence sometimes don't match the pace of decision and real policies or changes at home. Considering that the enlargement, again, as Thomas mentioned, it's continuing to be a merit-based process. So the European perspective is there, the eloquence from our countries is there, but the necessity to see the process rather than something that is coming pretty soon because we deserve it and we have been suffering from so many years and for over 2 decades on whenever trying to reach the membership. I still think that there is a big gap in that regard. So for me, there are like some three main shifts that we from the Balkans should consider whenever it comes to the process of enlargement or accession in the EU. The first thing is that the EU priorities have evolved faster than the enlargement tools. The trust in institutions and the quality of life in the region are still unfortunately eroding. We had the chance with Tanya to listen a bit the new data, although nothing that new so much of the new securimeter prepared by the Regional Cooperation Council while we were in Belgrade, and not astonishingly so. But as I said, so something that is repetitive is that trust in institutions is eroding, which was quite a big paradox said even in that launch, that people in the region and citizens tend to distrust more the institutions that they elect than the institutions where they don't have a vote, which is creating a big paradox. So the citizens tend not to trust their governments, parliaments, or police sectors and so on, but they tend to trust more the EU institutions because still they hope that they are going to join the EU and that is going to solve all their problems. And the third thing is the demographic shifts. We mentioned this while in Belgrade, but the demographic decline is becoming existential. So this is not a gap that can be closed through the accession chapters alone. So for me, the question is not if we are going to join the EU 2030 or 2034, but whether we align from now and try to catch the rhythm with the Europe's core agenda on security, competitiveness, energy, and what I said previously. So do we have time? Are we going to do this in the process of accession? Okay, this is an exercise and a question that I cannot answer now. No one would like to hear, or anyone from us ourselves, to say to any of the leaders of the region, there are some more things that we need to pay attention to. And I don't think that we have time on that, because in a world where nothing is certain, time is the only thing that we don't have. So for this enlargement phase, let's say, to be real, strategic, again, I'm mentioning what we discussed a week ago. I guess that the Balkans should try work to be part of the EU strategies from now on innovation, on competitiveness, on the human capital, so brain drain, brain circulation and all, on the budget that we mentioned, because talking about enlargement without addressing the issue that we need a specific budget targeted to the new countries that will become member states or to the enlargement process in all, is quite important, because without that, even the membership of the new countries is going to be an illusion. So funds have to be there to support the new countries membership that are ready or hoping that will join by 2030.
Yeah.
So these are the things that how I see enlargement today. So I think enlargement more affected by the global changes, trends, and shifts. And on the other side, I think that it's quite important for us in the Balkans to start discussing not only on the chapters, but how we will be part from now on the new and part of the new trends and shifts that Europe is going into itself.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I took also notes on these comments, so they align and also complement with what Thomas said. So we thank you, Majlinda. So we move according to the agenda to Professor Gordana Turovic. Now the perspectives from Montenegro. Please, the floor is yours.
Good day, everybody. Also from my side, I will try to have a good time management. For the first, thanks for this opportunity and a very good structure of your panelists, I may comment. From Montenegrin shoes, I can shortly comment few things. For the first, there are a big debate about reform of enlargement policy. In that context, I see two different angles. One is how to avoid the veto on the bilateral level regarding accession talks in different phases. And second is how to approach to drafting accession treaties of new member states to carefully follow this decision-making processes and the rights and obligation of new members. So if we expect something from EU side, definitely it is part of flexibility in this potential blockades in different phases. It really impacts us as a disappointment if, for instance, Macedonia can't open first cluster, or Ukraine can't start, or even Moldova can't because they are still in couple. So it is one point. Second is regarding the fear of so-called advanced candidates, how it will be with our accession treaties. For the first, I expect that Montenegro will receive that positive decision that they will start to draft accession treaty for Montenegro in December on council decision and conclusions. It will be very incentive message for Montenegro. In that context, I carefully passed through accession treaty of Bulgaria and Romania and Croatia, and of course there are a lot of clauses related to measures to follow rule of law and other areas later, but there are no rules to change any rights regarding decision making. So you are in or you are out. A full-fledged membership is still the same because there are no reform of accession of treaties. You can't change something what is not changed in the Article 49. It is regarding rules. So we expect, as it is mentioned in communication, that accession treaties provide an instrument to ensure that this positive dynamic is maintained and stronger safeguard against backsliding in commitments. I understand that fear. We are looking what happens inside. But at the same time, if we will change our constitution, delivering voluntarily some rights towards the supranational level as common European policies, then of course we expect, as it is mentioned in Croatian constitution, that citizens and institutions of candidate finishing accession process will have the same rights and obligation as other countries. If you delegate your rights for leading some common policies, then definitely you expect that they will be part of decision making regarding that policies. But of course, we will, for the first, I personally understand that fear from Brussels side, because there are not enough political stability to guarantee that there will be no some changes within the leadership in our countries in the case of accession. And I like to see some guarantees, but not against key rules what is in treaties. And do hope that it will be somehow developed as a new momentum and a new experience with some candidates from Western Balkan. I also like to stress and share with you my concerns regarding new instruments what EU offer. It is this reform agenda cycle. So they borrow for us. They borrow on the financial market and they present their readiness to support our reform without full membership over the IPA 3. So if you look at in reform agenda scoreboard, probably you are familiar with that. It is very well developed platform how to follow reforms in steps in reform agendas of each country. So there are about more than 600 steps in total for a Western Balkan region, for instance, and level of realization after 2 tranches is only 39 measures out of this 618. For instance, for Serbia, it is 0. For Kosovo, is 0. Albania is, again, the best, with the 52% of total of the regional success, 21 measures, and Montenegro is with 12 measures out of 32, which means that we need also from our side to show more focus and more measures to be realized through the reform agendas. It is in our garden. It is in our from our side. So we should add it. And of course, in Montenegro, we are fully aware of all our weaknesses. Do hope that crucial 2026 year will be in favor on progress in this regard. So my 5 minutes expired. I think that I achieved to send few messages.
Yeah, thank you. But it was very, substantial. I took 3 aspects: the decision making mechanisms, the advanced and new members to have the same approach, and also on these the implementation new mechanisms as a growth plan. So these were the aspects that make some notes. So thank you very much. Yes, talking about the reform agenda, we'll, according to our agenda, move to Simona Kaczarska. She's from European Policy Institute, North Macedonia. Already is doing part of this, the regional project for reform agenda monitoring. But Simonida, floor is yours. You have your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Fatmir, and good morning from my side as well. 5 minutes, a lot to say. Going where you left me, if we start with the reform agenda, my organization leads a regional EU-funded project that monitors the reform agendas in all of the 6 Western Balkan countries, from aiming to provide a much-needed civil society input and also to provide oversight together with partners in all of the capitals in the Western Balkans. I would like to link it to the discussion on what we see actually the impact of the reform agendas for the last year has been on the enlargement process, rather than looking at it independently, as was mentioned by Professor Đurović. We see that in the difficult political cases such as Bosnia and Kosovo, we have either non-adoption or political matters have actually blocked, as in the case of Kosovo. So what we have is basically 4 countries that are implementing the reform agendas. The good news is that actually in those that exceeded SEPA, the Single European Payment Area, we see the movement in the free movement of capital chapter. This is something that we discussed with Mr. Hagleitner very recently in Berlin. Even in the case of the country where I'm from, North Macedonia, this is the only chapter that managed to move its level of preparedness last year, as in the other cases that have not moved far along. We see that it has had this impact, which possibly also indicates, if we want to learn from it, the need from the Commission to actually pressure for more initiatives for this gradual integration for the other countries that are not among the first 2, if we focus on the Western Balkans, that are not in the first group of 4 that were mentioned by Mr. Hagleitner. On the other hand, from a regional perspective, and I see my Linda here, for those of us that live in the region, it's very difficult also to see down the road how will a potential accession of Albania and Montenegro impact the regional cooperation, impact the regional dimension. I mean, we are very supportive of the approach of having the front runners, but I think most of us think that this will steer positive competition. I think that, in the scenario in which the others are left, it's a bit, I think that there's a bit of different discussion that we need to have for how long will this be the case and what will be actually the impact on the region, especially because we noticed that in the front runners, the reform agendas are also in the back seat in the terms of regional cooperation. It's very difficult to discuss some issues now that we know need to be on the agenda in that sense. The last point is probably also the point of the managing expectations in the front runners as well. Because if we see the movement in Montenegro, will now 12 chapters moving ahead with the increased preparedness. In Albania, a bit less. It does make the goals seem ambitious. So the question of speed over the feasibility of implementing the reforms within a year is also on the table. But let's hope that this will be a positive way, that this will have a positive impact on the dynamics in the region as well. From our side, because I'm mostly working in civil society, as most of you know, I think that I would be amiss if I don't mention that most of us were very happy and relieved to see an enlargement strategy that mentioned the realistic goal of accession, and that went a step further in actually signaling the positive impact that the EU enlargement has had on the Union itself, and went a step further in reframing the discussion on enlargement as a joint endeavor. I think that for a long time we were stuck in this discussion in which what are the risks, and we are slowly moving to the discussion of what is actually also the benefit for the EU. But this, the element that is missing and that was not mentioned and most of us are waiting for, are the pre-enlargement policy reviews, because I think that also by publishing that document and engaging with the candidates, both in the Western Balkans, but both also Ukraine and Moldova, on the impact that the future enlargement would have on the policies that will be reviewed by the Commission, will kind of bring us a step further and possibly in the direction that Linda mentioned in terms of actually linking the region, including it in all of the current discussions that are ongoing in the Union. Ending there, 5 minutes.
Thank you. We have this time pressure, and also enlargement accelerating will mean policymakers working on reform, but also on strategic decisions. So we move now, thank you, Simonida. We move now to Professor Tanja Mišević. So she will share with us her insights on the process, where it now, and also probably some perspective from Serbia. Floor is yours.
So thank you very much and good morning to everyone. First and foremost, thank you very much, Fatmir, for inviting all of us. That means all potential candidate countries in order to exchange, because this is not very often that we are participating at the same time or the same fora, and it's important. One of the most important thing to have in mind is definitely to think of the holistic approach to the enlargement policy and to establish both understanding but also cooperation of all candidate countries, potential candidate countries from different regions, as this is one of the elements of the momentum, I would say. Looking at all of us participating, I see the first and foremost Gordana and Melinda from the very beginning of the process, 2007, or even before that time, when actually we start discussing about the potential of the Western Balkans and the possibility for becoming member. We still don't have, we have as Thomas said, very good to see you after so many years, or some years, not so many years. It's good that we do have idealistic or in terms of the national approach, realistic approach towards the accession ideas. But I would love also to see the European Union member states, particularly the response to that. As Simonida said, it will be very good to finally see the enlargement policy review, as we are waiting for some time now to hear what are the, in terms of the European Commission, the biggest challenges for the development of the enlargement policy. As we saw those days, the Center for European Policy, Belgrade, actually made the analysis of the costs of the enlargement. It's really something that you all have to go through, because it's really money-wise, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, much for the budget of the European Union. There are many issues that I would like to discuss, but I will just pinpoint them as I think it's extremely important. First, and this is my view from coming from Serbia, it's good to discuss at the same time the drafting of the accession treaty. Very much interested. This is the topic that really pushed things ahead. But at the same time, we are still talking about the application of the new negotiating methodology. For instance, I don't know if you are aware, Thomas probably yes, that we are working now in the enlargement process according to the both methodologies. In other words, Serbia is following the old methodology, which means the opening benchmarks, while Albania, don't get me wrong, really supportive to this, open easily all clusters, and I hope it's going to happen very soon for others that are applying new methodology. By the way, that was the reason why the new methodology has been introduced, to speed up the whole process of negotiation. On the other hand, you have one candidate country with a huge issue of how to circumvent the opening benchmarks, which are, what I saw, the closing benchmarks for some other candidate countries. This is the inequality that exists in the process, and somebody has to deal with this issue. It's less important that I'm coming from Serbia, but it's important to have also those inequality, especially if I'm, if I started with a need to discuss on the equal footing with all of us coming today at this webinar. Second important thing is, I could not agree more with Gordana. Only full-fledged membership is something that we all are asking or aiming to, particularly because this is something that the states in the region, all states that are candidate, promised to their citizens, that the reason why heading towards the membership is actually to be part of the European policies and taking the decisions. And in that respect, I think that the region knows, Simonida for sure, that I'm strongly against staged accession process, exactly because of that. You cannot become member without the equal footing, without the equal rights. But on the other hand, the third point that I would like to raise is, of course, following deeply into gradual accelerated integration. So the way that the growth plan has announced as a possibility, especially for the first pillar of the growth plan with a set of measures, is extremely good way forward in terms of those that are not leaders in terms of becoming member as soon as it possible. Yet, I disagree with the need to make the list of those areas for the gradual integration bigger. I would like to see much more structure. For instance, we do have the answer on SEPA. We do have the answer on ACA. So a separate agreement that is needed. But we still don't have the full-fledged answer for something that we are all aiming for, regardless of the path towards membership. And this is the green lanes. How we are going to overcome the issue and how we are going to join much more or use much more of Schengen is one of the most important things. There is no instrument for this. So I would like to see, like it's the case in terms of Ukraine and Moldova, because they are specific DCFTI. We don't have that type of advanced approach regarding our SAA. So last thing is definitely a call for the European Commission to make the linkage between the gradual integration and the negotiation process in terms of that the advance in gradual integration will also mirror into the accession process, which is one of the most important things. So I told you so many issues that I would like to share, but I consider this to be one of the first webinar that you organize, and we will continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for the comments and taking notes. And we will make, as I mentioned, one brief report of these discussions and share with you. So making sure that comments here can reach further the institutions and decision makers. So we move now to Alban Shani from Reinvest Kosovo. So your 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Fatmir, and it's a pleasure to be part of this discussion and also to see so many familiar faces. Now, speaking almost at the end, it's not easy to sort of avoid repetition with so many valid points made by previous speakers, but I'll try just to give few reflections on what I think the enlargement process or where it stands and what this means for the region. First of all, the enlargement today is about both economic convergence and Europe's strategic repositioning. So for our region, enlargement should essentially not be only a political ambition. It's about catching up economically, and that means improvement in productivity, competitiveness, and also a shift from a low-cost model to an economy that creates real value. And without this kind of convergence, the enlargement will not be will always be politically vulnerable from both sides, from Western Balkan countries, but also from it will not be an easy sell in domestic political markets in big European countries. And as part of a regional project that Reinvest is working on, coordinated by Vienna Institute, along with regional peers, we've developed this convergent dashboard that we see that there is a lot of things that need sort of improvement. There is also a bigger picture. So with everything that is happening in Europe, essentially enlargement has become part of EU strategic depth. And this puts our region and also the Ukraine and Moldova as part of a long-term security architecture. And I think this is important in aligning our priorities and strategic priorities. But this brings us to the second point and to the who from your title. Essentially, the real test is whether our institutions can deliver on the reforms consistently, sorry. And also because these reforms are fundamental for all the elements I mentioned earlier in terms of competitiveness, investment, growth, and so on. As part of our work at Reinvest, and I personally has served in both occasions as a rapporteur for a common regional market as part of the think tank and civil society forum on the Berlin process. I focus on the common regional market work, and I want to sort of say a few words about that in the process of EU integration. And I think that the CRM is the best opportunity of the region to prepare for EU single market, but should not be understood as a replacement, but essentially as a step towards the EU single market. And if we were to fully implement it, this, among other things, could mean that the region could have more inter-regional FDI, which currently stand at insignificant levels. We have inter-regional trade, but again, all regional countries' biggest trading partners are Western European countries. So essentially, the common regional market and attraction of FDI could also create forward and backward supply chain linkages across the region, which could strengthen our companies to both export and scale up. However, for the common regional market to work, it must be seen as part of EU, not as an alternative model. And I think we can draw here from the model or experience from Visegrad countries, which is a perfect example. So they started making the most of CEFTA, of the initial CEFTA, only when EU membership became a real and a credible destination, so to say. So I think that political clarity is something that is needed also for Western Balkan countries. And last thing that I want to mention, I think it was mentioned previously, but has to be stressed and taken into account on these discussions, is the issue of migration. This is now a structural factor in enlargement debate. The region is losing people at effectively at a rate which is not sustainable. So every 2 minutes, one citizen from Western Balkan legally migrates to Western European countries, which is becoming an issue. And essentially, as the EU integration process feels distant or uncertain, migration essentially becomes a rational choice. So having the EU agenda reversed and as a real option, this would also help both halt migration, but also create a process of sort of mobility scheme or circular migration that could be used as a source of knowledge and also of skill and link with Western European markets. I'll stop here in the effect of time, but we're happy to.
Thank you. You are just in time. So thank you, Alban, for your comments and insights. So with this, we have now one more from the Western Balkans. It's Adnan Efendic, professor, and he's also an institutional economics professor, so probably bring also perspective where Alban mentioned about the delivery of the institutions, the capacity on the reform. So, and not only that, more insights about the strategic aspects of EU enlargement and the Western Balkans and the Eastern Partnership. Please.
Thank you, Fatmir. It's a pleasure to be part of this webinar. And as you said, I am an institutional economist, and I will try to make a few points because this is very limited time about institutional context and economic and business environment versus EU enlargement, and in particular, I will put emphasis on Bosnia and Herzegovina since I'm coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I mean, it is well known that Bosnia and Herzegovina has very complex institutional structure and which causes high costs. Very often we have limited outcomes and I would say less efficient institutional outcomes and institutions, which in the end rises also informalities in our society, but also this is something which is more or less present in other Western Balkan societies as well. So institutions are complex, could be improved because if we look at typical institutional indices, efficiency is very often around 60%, so a lot of space for improvement. And why this is important for the EU enlargement, because the EU enlargement is basically associated with institutional reforms, and we do have a problem to agree on many institutional reforms which we need. So EU enlargement actually is sort of anchor which can be used from Bosnian perspective to get agreement on needed institutional reform in the society. This is also associated with a lot of political instabilities which we have in the country. And as Alban mentioned, migration is a big issue, or let's say emigration from the region, from Bosnia and Herzegovina. And if we examine factors which drive aspirations to migrate from the region, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, then you would find that institutional inefficiency and political instabilities are at the top of these factors which drive people out, or their aspirations to go out. So institutional reform, political instability, is something which we need in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and through the EU enlargement, I believe that we would get something which is needed, which is sort of external push to achieve these reforms, because we need them, and because the EU integration is our strategic orientation, and I hope that we will use the EU integration as also tool or support to get institutional reforms on the ground, which we can't currently achieve. When we talk about the business and economic environment, it is affected by the institutional context. It is affected by the EU integration as well, I would say. I've just done one research recently, and it is interesting, how the business sector is already attached to the EU integration, not only in terms of trade, in terms of exchange, but also in terms of their, let's say, plans, in terms of their strategies, what they want to do. So what I've found, because we use the recent primary data from Bosnia and Herzegovina, that investor confidence and also their aspirations to grow businesses is very much attached to the EU integration success, and how they see the EU integration success. Simply said, if they see that EU enlargement, EU integration of the society is heading in a good directions, they are more positive about growth of their businesses, they are more positive about development of their companies. So the message is very strong here. The real sector is let's say already very much attached to the EU integration, and we can see that they are going ahead if we compare what we get as outcomes from political and institutional context. And I think the political and institutional environment, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina, can learn a lot from what we have on the ground and what we have in the business environment. So I think the EU integration is sort of strategic goal orientation, and I use this word anchor for the achieving something which sometimes we can't get internally, and that's why I think the EU integration is so important. And also I would like to say that it is also important that the EU has some sort of alignment, adjustment towards the candidate and potential candidate countries in the region, and every enlargement was unique, and this is the case with this one, which is going to be in the future, and which is, as we could see, something real, and this is very important positive sign for all of us. And I hope that in a couple of years of time we will have much positive and much, let's say, more optimistic discussion regarding the integration of the region into the EU.
Yeah. Thank you, Adnan. Thank you for your insights about Bosnia. So before we move now, since we analyze with Western Balkans countries, I just want to remind the participants or attendees that they have the opportunity to write question and answers. There is a box there while we are still discussing on the panelists, and also it can be audio by raising hands. So meanwhile, we will continue with Ukraine. We have Professor and Vice Rector Ksenia Smirnova. Please, floor is yours about your perspective of Ukraine on EU enlargement, and we know the specifics and difficult situation you face with the war there. So we appreciate you being also with us today here. So please.
Thank you very much, Fatmir. Thank you very much. I admire your very fantastic combination of different, very deep engaged experts in the EU enlargement. And really, thank you very much for gathering all us together. It's really a very unique opportunity to share the experience, to share the narratives, to share the regional context on this huge aspect on EU enlargement. despite the sleepless nights, because I'm really happy to discuss these issues even today in the morning, despite everything and despite all that attacks that we are challenging each time and each night. EU enlargement and EU integration, it was and it is now the core element of the foreign policy of Ukraine and the core element of the resilience, even through the war. And I really wanted, so for me, it's quite difficult would be not to repeat all that issue that I'm fully familiar with all the previous speakers, and I can see that we are all on the same page. But at the same time, I want to focus on this very strict timing on two major aspects. From one side, we're speaking about the local context, and then we're speaking about the EU perspectives. I could rather focus on that. And for example, for me personally, I don't like the phrase when speaking about Ukraine, there are some experts that are calling that accession through the war. No, I definitely disagree with that issue, because integration was one of the priority before the invasion, before the war started. And of course, a lot of issues in domestic situation in Ukraine and the war was also connected with the European integration, by the way. So that's why this aspect, this is the core element for Ukraine. And this is a very long and very painful story since the very beginning of association agreement and all that issues, how they was negotiated and this new type of agreement. And by the way, even before the invasion, there were a lot of official data that focused on the more than 70% of the commitments that were fulfilled before the invasion. So it really, the process that was started since the very beginning with a very high level of domestic commitments. At the same time, I really wanted to stress that when we're speaking about European enlargement, EU enlargement, this is the reciprocal process of transformations, I could say. And from one side, this is the transformation of the regions, local transformations, huge transformations. At the same time, there are huge transformations in the EU. When we're speaking about the decision-making, I fully support that idea that this is remain one of the main issues, that it should be in the form of transformations. How to use and what are the new experiments to use the pastoral clause, how to use other variants of decision-making procedures, and so on. So all that issues, and when we are speaking about this enlargement, if it could be 30 or 31, we speak that the EU is in the way of transforming itself. Of course, even due to the current situation, not so simple situation, due to the security issues, to the common foreign security issues, we're speaking about not to open Pandora box, but at the same time to transform the vision and transform the flexibility of that. Speaking about Ukraine, we were analyzing very deeply the latest report, and we're really aware about all that figures that are there, and these figures really showed the optimistic way of dynamism. Still, I want to emphasize that it is very important to be in couple with Moldova. It's really very important not to shift and not to separate this process that it was in the very beginning. And I think that we all understand what are the reasons of that. Of course, we were fully aware about this previous presidency trio. It was very hard presidency trio, especially a year ago. But at the same time, all that issues politically and legally was argued. Now we are also observing the finishing of the next trio. I know that from the governmental point of view, from Ukrainian side, we are now currently on the stage of very strict negotiations of the opening of the first cluster, fundamentals. And this is crucial. Because the next half a year I think politically it could be quite difficult through this presidency trio from that issue. So, and another issue, we should remember that EU enlargement, it's the process that has two sides of the coin. From one side, this is the pure legal bureaucratic aspect. And you could imagine that Ukrainian side, from these more than 3 years, being in full-scale invasion, being in real true war, not hybrid and so on. But during these 3 years, we accumulated all the commitments with all the levels of government on gathering all together with this all information about European integration. We provided last year, we provided the simulations on negotiations. It's quite interesting new experiment that provided on the different levels of government. And it was really preparatory stage of these simulations. And another side of the coin, of course, this is political. I am seeing, Fatmir, that you are a little bit pushing me that limits on 5 minutes. And of course, let me stop on this another side of the coin we are all aware of. But we should think that all these both sides of the coin, they could be together. All the commitments are gathering in one aspect and doing a lot. And figures in the report, they're really shows us progress and dynamism in this process. Thanks.
Thank you for understanding. I know there are a lot of things to be said, important ones. So now we move to our panelist from Moldova. It's Liliana. Please, the floor is yours with insights from Moldova about EU enlargement. Please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to contribute to this discussion and share some of Moldova's experience toward its path into European Union. So basically, Moldova's story starts of clear progress from economic cooperation to negotiation accession. So we started in 2013 by signing the DCFTA with the European Union, which linked us closer to the European market. And already in 2022, we applied for joining the European Union. And in 2023, Moldova received the candidate status, and we started already the negotiations for accession. So basically, the last few years, Moldova has advanced very fast on its accession path, and as the European Commission reports notes, basically we have completed successfully the entire screening process already, which is also an important achievement for Moldova. And even we hold in 2025 in summer the European Union Moldova Summit, which is also a signal of a stronger partnership and commitment with European Union, because it shows already a more clear path, not just from political aspiration, but towards already a clear integration process. Also, according to the recent report of European Commission, Moldova have already met the criteria and opened the negotiations on 3 clusters. It's about first, second, and sixth cluster, and it is expected to open the negotiations on the remaining clusters by the end of the year. So basically, the target which we proposed, which the government proposed as closing the negotiations by 2028 and accession 2030, is very ambitious objectives, and basically it will face definitely a lot of challenges too. Basically, it is achievable if continuing negotiations and accelerating the pace of the reforms in the country, which are needed on many key sectors. Basically, also Moldova already received access to the EU growth plan and will have already the first part of the pre-financing approved out of this growth plan, which will allow to carry out further structural reforms across different key sectors. But of course, among the main challenges which Moldova still has is regarding the justice reform, public administration modernization and consolidation of institution, which is very important. Another challenge refers to economic situation, because even if we have inflation stabilized in the last years and debt level are quite moderate, exports to European Union are quite strong. Since DCFTA nowadays we have like 55% of exports directed to European Union, but still we have different vulnerabilities in terms of current account deficit, high import dependence due to lack of natural resources as energetic resources and gas, and other pressures like also migration, which many of our colleagues mentioned here today, which is a pressing issues for the Balkans as well. And of course, we have to strengthen more the institutional capacity. Moldova have adopted the National Program for EU Accession 2025-2029, which imposes a structured plan which will contribute to implementation of reforms and clear transition to joining European Union. So basically, nowadays, even before accession, Moldova can deepen its integration in different areas, as for example, for custom systems or energy markets, digital platforms, and so on. So basically, despite the 2030 objective is quite ambitious, our government believes is still very realistic, and the result in fall of parliamentary election confirmed the path towards EU integration, the willingness of the Moldovan citizen to access European Union. So those we will continue, the government will continue to work towards achieving these objectives. So thank you very much. I think my time is
yeah, thank you, Jana. So I really want to thank you for keeping to the timing. It has been challenging, but now we have the opportunity to check with the audience if there are some questions. So far, I don't see there one, but I would also invite if there are. We have few minutes left for discussion from questions from the audience. Okay. Meanwhile, we can go on the making the recap on interventions. I see there is one question. One. Can you just see which is the... There is a question here from Ms. Daniela Boczwarska, who is asking what political leadership traits are the most necessary to push enlargement forward by 2030. So, and anyone, let's see if someone would like to comment on this, and we move to our final interventions as panelists. So this is one of the questions, which is a general one, I think, for everyone, each of the panelists. And the other one, which is in line with this, is about the 2030 perspective. whether what are the scenarios or possible perspectives, how many countries can join the EU by 2030 from the Western Balkans and Ukraine and Moldova. It was mentioned earlier from Thomas from one aspect on these dynamics. So there is another question from another attendee, which says, I would be interested to hear thoughts on how the Commission will promote accession in member states and will be able to convince member states to vote yes when and if the time comes. So probably it's about the perception and perspectives that citizens of EU that we see from Eurobarometer, but also from the decision makers from EU institutions and member states. So with these two questions, I want to thank you, to thank the attendees for making this question, which gives the opportunity to move to, and I have one here with raised hand. So Alexandra Ruzhin, I will ask her to make the question, and then we go for the final round of panelists. So Alexandra Ruzhin, please, your comment, your question.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Just please make a question.
Okay, thank you. First, thank you so much for organizing this important event and gathering distinguished panelists to discuss on an important topic that brings us all together, not only the countries in the Western Balkans, but also from Ukraine and Moldova. Each one of the panelists touched upon crucial points that are important not only specifically for the countries they represent, but also for the region as a whole. Nevertheless, one point which was shared across all the discussions was the meritocracy of the process and the need for the countries to really focus on the internal reforms in order to bring their systems and the processes and the regulations closer to the European Union. In that regard, an important question arises with respect to the reform agendas. If the reform agendas were to be used as a mirror of the level of preparedness of the countries for moving ahead in the accession process. And we've heard that only the front runner of Albania has fulfilled only 52% of the actions of the steps in the reform agenda, whereas, for example, North Macedonia has fulfilled 6 out of the 21 actions that were due by the 2 evaluation processes. How would you evaluate the process of preparedness? Or are we able or should we use the pace of implementing the reforms that were part of the reform agenda as a barometer of how well the countries are individually prepared to move forward in the accession process? And I, as a citizen, as a former employee in the Ministry of Finance who was very much directly involved in the reform agenda, would very much be interested in further webinars of this kind that would go into more the nitty-gritties of the reform agenda and discuss the issues or the underlying reasons for the countries, especially in the Western Balkans, to be so slow or so indecisive in implementing the due reforms under the reform.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexandra, for your question. It's also to inform other panelists here. Alexandra Ruzhin is also a former ambassador to Sweden or North Macedonia and an economist that we work together for the growth plan. So thank you, Alexandra. So we had 3 questions and another one that was mentioned by Alexandra Ruzhin. I will read the 3rd question, which is, how can Kosovo solve all problems for integration without parliament and government? So with this questions that were raised. I invite the panelists to make their comments on the questions that were raised, and also making the final round of their interventions. So in this case, we have, according to the time, only 2 minutes to go to the point. I know it's very time pressure, but we can go a bit, if it takes more than 90 minutes, we can go beyond 11:30. So I see Melinda will make her intervention. Please, Melinda, the floor is yours, please.
No, just no intervention, but just to answer to the question on the political leadership traits that are needed to push the enlargement. So if I'm not mistaken, it's you and me who love politics more than our colleagues and peers in the panel here, or especially me. So what might be maybe of substance? For me, one thing is a must: to be quite serious about the process. Leave the smoke and mirror rhetoric behind. Usually, for good leaders is to have an enlargement integration mindset, to understand that necessary reforms and the institutional competence is quite needed in the process, that the commitments that you take are serious, not to please the European side and the member states, but those are verifiable because of the citizens. What you are doing for the sake of reforms in your own country. So seriousness, political steadiness, as I said, like integration, enlargement, accession, mindsets, understanding that you need to have the courage to take important decision. And one last thing, engineering a coalition of people. That will be quite important for the communication, and having a process where somebody or everybody has a role, and trust and understands really well what does it mean, the process of integration. So maybe some of those ideas. So
Yeah,
to
thank
leave
you.
the selfishness and too much ego aside. So is a process for the nation and not a process for the leaders and individuals.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, thank you for addressing these aspects. Now we have the final round. So Thomas, you started first, but I will like also to close then from the perspectives you hear also with the reflection from other panelists here. You will make also your comments afterwards. So anyone, can we go around very briefly? We start with Liliana. Do you want to add something what we missed last time about after this conversation as final comments from your side? How do you see the EU enlargement, or some recommendations for EU institutions and other countries to share your experience and views?
So basically, I think as we had different experience in EU enlargement in different years already, over a decade ago when we had the last enlargement, as we mentioned, basically it's a difficult path. Many reforms are needed. So basically, for all the countries which are currently aspiring to joining the European Union is a quite challenging time, but I think probably the whole accession process helps the countries to strengthen their institutions, to consolidate democratic practices, and to accelerate modernization across different sectors of economy. So basically, when the process is credible, and supported, so countries can try to deliver reforms even under difficult circumstances like we have right now for Ukraine, for example, but we are doing quite a good process.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We are also with the time pressure. So, but I want to also hear from others. If you want to add more, we leave it. Who wants to come with your comments? So, Seni, are you going to say some views from your side?
Very shortly, even after the reflection of all our thoughts, I could say EU enlargement is a huge elephant that should be eaten by parts. And it's both for all of us, for our countries, for state, and for the EU. It's a proverb, of course. This is the symbolical issue. There are a lot of pillars. There are a lot of core elements that we stress today. Legal process, legal transformations, and domestic reforms transformations that are really crucial. Political transformations, economic preparedness, and all other spheres within the policies that should be, and security issues, and the preparedness for the enhancement of the instruments of the common foreign and security policy, specifically in the EU and in the region. And all that, I think that all that pillars should be assessed together as a huge elephant, but that is stand with a lot of pillars. This is very short reflection from my side.
Oh, thank you for the comments. So, Adnan, are you here with us? Yeah, please.
Yes, thank you, Fatmir. Well, the EU enlargement is a strategy which should help us to achieve better quality of life in the very end. And as I said in my short discussion, especially from the point of view of Bosnia and Herzegovina, political stability, institutional reforms, economic development, these are interlinked issues, but at the same time, this is nothing new. I mean, if we look criteria for EU membership, they overlap with them. So following the EU, let's say, policy, strategies, recommendations, suggested institutional reforms is something which is internally good for our societies, our economies, and our countries. So I think we have joint interests which overlap and which should bring better lives to all in the very end. So there is no alternative. And I would again emphasize political stability, credible institutional reforms, and economic development. Economic development is mostly influenced by the institutional reforms, institutional efficiency, and simply this is triangle which is working in a positive direction.
Thank you, Adnan. Alban, are you going to add something?
Well, I'll just maybe I just go through some of the questions that maybe I can give some insight and just a couple of last remarks at the end. There is a question about how can Kosovo solve all problems for integrations with our parliament and government. Even when we had a functioning parliament and government, we couldn't solve all the problems. So it is not just at this, and it's not just Kosovo, the whole region. I think, sort of jokes aside, I think it is a prerequisite to have a functioning parliament and government, even for things like ratifying the provisions from the growth plan and others. Suggest that there should be functioning institutions for these reforms to act. However, we have a scheduled new elections for 28th of December, and hopefully we will have a new government coming from a democratic process, which is, I think, important. But also this goes to say, not just for the Kosovo case, but also for the rest of the region, that the reforms should generate what we call the ratchet effect. So essentially reforms that cannot slide back easily. So we create a critical mass for what we call the irreversible progress. And on the topic of the other questions about the Commission, how can Commission promote accession to member states, I think it relates to one of the points I made earlier, that whilst the Commission cannot force enlargement, it can still play a critical role in shaping political climate in which member states decide. So I think framing enlargement as a strategic EU interest and not just a favor to candidates is one aspect. And the other, it should support convergence, because without economic convergence, it will not be an easy sell on both sides, nor for countries in the region, but also from the democratic political markets in big EU countries.
Thank you, Alban. So we have now Tanya. Yeah, are you here? Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's interesting that we all skipped the question of 2030 as a timeline, which in my book is a very good way that we are discussing, because we enlisted all the issues, including the political will, but also the attitude of the public opinion. And Alban, trust me, it's possible that the reforms are reversible, and we are seeing that in Serbia now, which is a huge problem, a huge debate inside the society, yet without EU as a topic. And I was struck with what Ksenia said of the support of the public opinion in terms, especially during the wartime, and that type of alliance of the whole of the society is something that we somehow missed in the story of the enlargement process. I would like to return to the Alexandra's question, because that was actually what Alexandra from North Macedonia asking about the measures of the reform agenda. How come that they are not something which is fulfilled easily? Because they are not naturally belonging to the national reform agendas. That is actually bits and pieces taking outside a different document, strategic or the negotiation document, and put into reform agenda as an element to prove the readiness. And we saw, Simonida told us, but all others too, it does not prove the readiness. So that means that something has to be done. And my way of how I see it's a possibility to upgrade the level on the implementation of the reform agendas. I'm talking about all of them, not only necessarily one for Serbia, is to link them better with the negotiation process, to push and pull, or to mirror the process. And the third thing, and sorry if I took more time, my suggestion to you, Fatmir, to meet again once when the Thomas and colleagues from the European Commission propose the enlargement policy review. And to see what we from this side, from outside, are seeing on those issues. I would be very much interested to see that, but also to discuss this. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanya. That's very concrete, specific. Thank you. So, Simonida.
Yes. Just continuing along what was just mentioned, I would not consider the reform agendas as an indicator of preparedness, but they are the indicator of progress for the last year, definitely, because that's why we see the movement in Albania. We see a bit better in Montenegro. North Macedonia has traditionally been the good pupil in some of these areas. They would argue it's about 30%. We just had a deep discussion yesterday with the ministry. But I would also agree that the measures are disentangled from the overall accession process. So I would not consider them as the main reference point for the preparedness, but for the political will and for the readiness to invest for the last year in the EU accession. It has been an indicator of such, because in the case of North Macedonia, a lot of the measures that were not fulfilled were actually an issue of mix of political will with the decision not to allocate funds in some of the areas, such as the judiciary. So we ended up where we did. But our conclusion has been that in the absence of the overall process, it's very difficult to actually focus also on the reform agendas to deliver. We see better results in Albania and in Montenegro. One sentence on 2030, because yeah, Tanya said, I think I might be subconsciously forgetting that point, because sometimes maybe it doesn't fit me. I think that from our side, we do need to pressure for either 2030 to pressure the governments for their self-declared commitments, because the Commission also uptook them. And I think that even those countries such as my own should have a date in which they should push for in terms of the being ready at their end, given its level of preparedness. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Simonida, also for the time. So now, Montenegro, Gordana, your views.
Okay. In the case, my first advice is that we should be focused more on reform agendas. It is something which balance somehow all countries regarding EU agenda. And in the case of Montenegro, I passed through the complementarity between closing benchmarks and steps of a reform agenda. It's very high level. So if we finish something what is in reform agenda, that is definitely something what we already have in closing benchmarks. Maybe because we are at that level of progress. Second issue, what we did not mention, but I think it's also important, maybe it is addressed towards Commission. We are familiar with proposal of new MFF, and we welcome that flexibility regarding candidate countries to promote it more towards countries of enlargement as good instrument to recognize possibility to transform some measure in post-accession support, such it was the case in fifth enlargement, where that mechanism was possible on the mid of the MFF. So MFF will be finished in 2034. It is much more than 2030 agenda. And of course, budget is not in comparison with the previous enlargements. In new budget proposal, there are defense budget quite huge. There are obligation to repay next generation. So it is something what burden, and of course merge of common agricultural policy and cohesion policy in one heading. So a lot of changes in the new budget, and it reflects our readiness, and maybe to promote it in a little positive manner towards us.
Yeah, thank you, Pana. So now, Melinda, can you give us your insights from this discussion?
I'm trying to think if I have any insights that hasn't been mentioned. Which frankly I don't find any, but trying to combine maybe very shortly what we discussed, I find one thing that is missing in the reform agendas, let's say / growth plan. We tried to introduce it in the common regional market, but again, given the new developments in Europe and everywhere, I think this might be one of the topics that should immediately draw the attention of everyone, which is the massive demographic shifts in the region and the demographic decline in Europe. For me, that should be a basis for in the discussions for the next enlargement, especially because the reform agendas, the EU integration process, the chapters and so on do not really target one of the biggest problems, that is the change in the migration, the change in the workforce, the human capital movement, the shrinking of our societies and in the EU. So I don't think that it's going to be a real enlargement without taking into the consideration these factors of shrinking societies. Because as I said, it's going to influence everything, starting from the new MFF. and the calculations that are done based on, let's say, the budgetary level based on the current population of our countries and the EU. So leaving this gap and not discussing, let's say, or considering the demographic decline, for me, it's going to be a strategic risk. So maybe the demographic reform should be part, and this might be like one insight that I see missing in every piece of the puzzle that we have been discussing in the process of enlargement.
Thank you, Melinda. So, Thomas, now you have all these discussions we have had, and also the questions from the audience. Would like also your reflection on this and some responses and views. So, please.
Yeah, thanks. And very good to hear colleagues from the different countries. Just very briefly, 3 points probably on the leadership, on communication, and on gradual integration. Leadership 2030 also linked to the reform agenda. I mean, my take is I think the reform agendas are, they are a little indicator of the capacity to implement reforms. Now, and beyond kind of the methodology we use, of course, the overall standard for us still remains the alignment with the acquis. And in that sense, I think we need to be aware that for example, these targets of closing 26, 27 are extremely, extremely ambitious for leaders. And I fully agree with also what Melinda, Tanya, and others have said of the importance of remaining focused. It requires an unprecedented acceleration that would be needed. I think Montenegro, if my memory serves me well, currently has 67 laws in parliament for acquis alignment. So this, just to give you a bit of a figure, and that is only the beginning. So it really requires a leadership. In that regard, what we are trying to do by also noting the dates of the leadership of the countries is, of course, on the one hand, an incentive, but it's also a challenge because citizens will hold those leaders accountable who have these targets. But it really requires keeping the remaining focused, because these will not there will not be a geopolitical rebate on EU standards and values. Secondly, on the question was asked on how the Commission intends to promote enlargement in EU member states. It's a good question because it requires ratification in 27 EU member states. We've done the Eurobarometer earlier this year. Enlargement is not a vote winner. We knew that. It's never been, to be honest. But still, most people ex post consider enlargement was a success. We of course focus in particular on those countries where support is those member states where support is particularly low. I think one element is important in there. I think that is also gradual integration. I think we need to get away from, we know Article 49 and so on is largely binary, but we are trying to build a more gradual path towards EU membership, and I think that is also crucial in the perception. Of course, a lot of work will be required again by candidate countries as well in this regard, working with EU member states. And I think certain would require a separate panel on future accession treaties will look like, but I think what we've said in the communication on safeguards, for example, will also be an important element in the discussions on ratifications in EU member states. And just a final word on gradual integration. I already mentioned the importance it has, integral part of the methodology. We've tried to make the link even stronger between progress on the accession path and gradual integration. I would just, point to two recent documents the Commission has put forward, the European Democracy Shield and the Civil Society Strategy, which considers the enlargement country as integral part in a way of the European space. And I think that's quite a new way of looking at it. But it's part of gradual integration, but a bit of a paradigm shift also for the European Commission. So that's why I wanted to point to these two documents as well. Again, thanks for the very, very good and refreshing discussion, and hope to see you in person as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, everyone, all the speakers in this panel discussion for the webinar. I will try to make a very short recap from the notes I was taking, and also some of my thoughts on this. And then leave this webinar with some open questions or some suggestion recommendations. So what I can put here, one is that EU integration, EU enlargement, it is essential to be considered as a strategic priority of EU institution itself, but also from the countries, from candidate and aspiration countries, to deliver. It is critical for the credibility of the process. The pace itself, it was mentioned here, is also another critical aspect. There were mentioned these accelerating programs, agendas, and also mechanisms to improve it. We need more mechanism to address these geopolitical shifts, the priorities, and need mechanism to address these issues. Institutions delivery, it was mentioned in terms of the reform, both on EU and Western and the candidate countries. It's critical for the credibility and also for the performance. Convergence, another issue, economic and convergence, and other aspects, and to prepare countries for these common market, regional cooperation. EU policy review contribution also from the countries from the region, the merit-based process, and demographics was another aspect that was mentioned here to be added on these priorities, like a growth plan and other mechanisms. As we have these 7 priorities already from European Commission for 24-29, it's prosperity and competitiveness, defense, security, people, strengthening societies, digital age, climate ambitions, also demographics, and democracy and delivery. And when you see this in MFF for 28-34, cohesion, prosperity takes 45%, competitiveness 30% approximately, global Europe 10%, administration 6%, repayment of debt almost 9%. And when we calculate the figures of EU enlargement on the current MFF and the coming one, currently it's only 1%, 1.1% of MFF. It is IPA funds, around 14 billion euros. And in the next one, trying to as it is redesigned with Western Balkans and Eastern Partnership, it's about 43 billion euros, which is amounting about 2.4% of total MFF for 2028 to 2034, which is a challenge on putting all priorities together. But EU enlargement, as we see, is remaining priority. And the last, what was mentioned here, were the leadership, 2030 agenda, communication, people, and gradual integration, but considering equal obligations and rights for the member states of EU. So I tried to put all this together, the notes that I was taking, and want to thank you once again. And sorry if I was missing right now something here mentioning, but we will have this in a written document to share afterwards. So thank you once again. Thank you very much, all the speakers and my friends, that you accepted this invitation and for your valuable contribution. of your insights and perspectives from the institution that you are representing and countries, or wider than that, your personal experience and views, and also the attendees who were with us together today and for their contributions with questions. So thank you, and looking forward for other similar events and contributions. So I wish you all the best for the rest of the day and the week.
Thank you, Fatmir.
Thank you, Fatmir.
Thank you.
All the best.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye all.
Bye.